I understand, but my priority right now is my family. I'll be back when my leave is over.
This is unacceptable, Anne. We can't afford to have you away for so long. If you don't come in, I might have to consider other options, like letting you go. I was also planning to make you the office manager.
No thanks. I will come back when my leave is over. Hi, I'm Anne. I want to tell you about my time after university, working at a law firm and meeting my husband, Max. I liked my job, even though it had some tough parts. While I was working, my boss, Robert, started acting in a way that made things very difficult for me. Let me share a couple of moments to show you what I mean. In a meeting, my colleague Sarah had a great idea to solve a problem. Everyone was excited about it, but when we talked about it, Robert took credit for the idea, making Sarah upset. It showed that he cared more about himself than the team. During a presentation to new clients, I suggested a creative idea to make our pitch better, but Robert quickly dismissed my idea and focused only on his own. This made it hard for the team to work together. At a celebration of a successful third quarter, Robert talked a lot about his achievements, ignoring the team's hard work. It seemed like he just wanted attention for himself. I had one project that I was proud of, and spent hours working overtime and taking the work home with me. Robert took credit for it again. I was angry and met with him to get some answers. Robert, we need to talk about the Miller project. I worked hard on it, but you took credit without saying I did anything.
Well, Anne, it's about the final report. I added a few concluding remarks. The bosses need to know who's making things work here.
I get that, but I'm the one who figured out how to save money. I want people to know I did that.
Come on, Anne. We're a team. What's mine is yours, right?
I want credit for my hard work. It's not fair for you to say it's yours.
Anne, you're too focused on getting credit. I make sure you get paid, don't I?
No, it's not enough. I did the work, and I want people to know. It feels bad when you say it's all yours.
The door is there if you want to leave.
I like my job, and I don't want to leave.
Well then, take it or leave it. I am busy now. Get back to work.
I pressed on despite the problems with my boss. I needed the money, so I said nothing. I tried to forget about my boss by focusing on my social life. I went out with my friends, and one of them introduced me to a young man. I found happiness in my relationship with my new boyfriend, Ben, who passed the bar exam and became a lawyer. As we spent more time together, Ben and I started talking about getting married. We shared dreams and supported each other. Soon we decided to get married in Las Vegas over a weekend in July. It was a sudden decision, but it felt right. When I went back to work after the wedding, I was excited to share the news with my colleagues. They were happy for me, and many brought me cards and gift certificates. Everyone except one person. My boss, Robert, looked away whenever my workmates asked me about the wedding. Instead of feeling happy for me, he added more assignments to my already heavy workload. I was forced to work overtime and even on weekends, leaving me with little time to spend with my new husband. The demanding work hours created a strain on our fresh marriage. Ben, I miss spending time with you. These long work hours are making it tough.
I feel it too, Anne. It's like we're ships passing in the night.
I thought things would get better after the wedding, but it's even busier now.
We need to find a balance. Our time together is important.
I agree, Ben. I want to make more time for us, despite the crazy schedule. Even though I worked a lot at the office, I found out I was going to have a baby. Juggling work and getting ready for a baby was tough. Most of the time I was pregnant, I kept working hard, trying my best with all the office stuff. Knowing a baby was coming made me happy but also stressed. When there was just 1 month left before the baby was due, I decided to take some time off. I had a note from the doctor saying it was okay. But my boss got mad, even though I followed all the rules. It felt like taking time off for something important, like having a baby, was a problem for them. I didn't care, and I took all my things and told them I would be coming back after my maternity leave was over. During my time off, I wanted to focus on taking care of myself, getting ready for the baby, and spending time with my partner. As the baby's arrival got closer and my stomach was getting bigger, I was feeling anxious and happy. My husband was also excited and wanted to get the house ready. To make things better, my husband found a bigger house for our family. We bought it and moved, giving us more space and a fresh start. Moving to this new place was a great feeling and a relief. It had the room and comfort we needed for our family. However, 2 weeks after the baby was born, I got a call from the boss.
Anne, we need you back at work immediately. There's a lot to catch up on.
I'm on maternity leave, Robert. I need time with my newborn. I have a child.
This isn't a vacation, Anne. We have deadlines to meet, and your absence is causing problems.
I understand, but my priority right now is my family. I'll be back when my leave is over.
This is unacceptable, Anne. We can't afford to have you away for so long. If you don't come in, I might have to consider other options, like letting you go. I was also planning to make you the office manager.
No thanks. I will come back when my leave is over. I hung up the phone. Despite my tough talk, I cried. We had a big mortgage to pay, and we couldn't afford the payments if only my husband worked. Still, Ben told me not to go into the office the following week. In the morning, I received a registered letter from the office stating that I would no longer be required to come to work due to some changes in the office. I was so shocked that I almost dropped the milk bottle that I was using to feed the baby. I called my husband at work, who was surprised and angry. He said he would help me sue the company due to wrongful dismissal. But I told him I needed a good reference, and I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to find a good job if the boss didn't recommend me. My husband told me to have faith, and he told me not to worry about this. Feeling treated unfairly as a mom, I decided to do something about it. I agreed that I needed to sue the company because they treated me poorly for having a family. I thought they fired me just because I took time off for my pregnancy. It was tough, but I wanted to show that I was good at my job and that being a mom shouldn't mean losing it. I must share my story and prove that it's not right for companies to treat people badly just because they have a family. I wanted to stand up not just for myself, but for everyone's right to be treated fairly at work. The day came for the court case, and I faced up against my old boss, Robert.
Your Honor, the reason we had to let Anne go was her consistently shoddy work. Her incompetence hurt important projects, and we couldn't afford the mistakes any longer.
This is untrue. The only reason why I got fired was because I got pregnant and went on maternity leave. I needed time to take care of my baby, and this company discriminated against me. I have never been more hurt and saddened. I feel I am punished for having a child.
Your Honor, Anne has a track record of dedication and success in her role. We have evidence of her great performance reviews. These allegations are an attempt to justify unfair treatment.
The court took a few days to deliberate, and after some worrying hours, the judge said I was right. I got $200,000 because they fired me unfairly, along with additional fees for loss of income. The company even had to pay for my lawyer and all the court costs too. Surprisingly, my friend from my former company told me the person who treated me badly, Robert, got fired. But only after the company sued Robert in order to recoup the money they had lost because of his actions. They managed to win their case, and Robert was on the hook for the $200,000 that I had won. As if that wasn't enough, several women saw his name in the news and came forward and charged him with sexual harassment, and the judge found him guilty. The company let him go without giving him his pension. Now, I'm happy working at a new place, and my husband and I are thinking about getting a German Shepherd. I read in the paper that Robert had been sent to prison for sexual offenses and had been sentenced to serving 15 years. It feels good when bad things happen to bad people in real life. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment. Dad, my computer was stolen.
No, it wasn't. We just gave it to Amanda's daughters. They need it for school.
What? That's a top-of-the-line gaming computer. They don't need something with that much power just to do math problems.
Well, I paid for it, so I get to say who gets to use it. And we gave it to Amanda's daughters. Besides, those video games are a complete waste of time.
Hi there, my name is Beth, and I really lived a life very similar to something out of a twisted fairy tale. It's complete with a wicked stepmother and not one, but two evil stepsisters as well. However, the real villain of this story is actually my father, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let me rewind things a bit to back when I was 14. My mother and father would argue constantly, and more than once. The police would need to be called and break up their fighting. On a few occasions, they would even throw things at each other. Suffice to say that they ended up getting divorced, but thankfully, rather than have a long and heated legal battle over who got custody of me. For the first time in quite a long time, they were able to come to an agreement and chose to have equal custody of me. It was a bit hectic spending 1 week with one parent and then the next week with the other. But even though they hated each other, they both adored me, and I loved them both just as much. And to be honest, they were much better parents once they weren't together anymore. They were also much happier people as well, but all that changed when my dad met Amanda. Anyone with half a brain in their head could see that she was a complete gold digger. But my dad couldn't get past just seeing a very attractive and hot woman. My mother was a bit on the heavier side, and Amanda looked like she could get a job posing for a swimsuit magazine. Honestly, I really didn't care who my dad dated so long as he was happy and they treated him well. But Amanda was obsessed with keeping up appearances. To make matters worse, her 2 daughters were exactly the same, and all 3 of them were obsessed with the latest fashion trends and designer clothes. For me, all I cared about was my video games, reading comic books, and going to every movie that ever came out. When they first started to date, I tried to keep my distance, but my dad insisted that I get to know Amanda and her daughters. They did try to include me in their favorite things, but it was a terrible idea.
Hey, Beth, are you interested in going shopping with me and my daughters?
Maybe. What are you going shopping for?
We don't really have a purpose in mind. We'll just go and try on clothes and see if we can find any good deals.
Oh, yeah, thanks, but I'll pass. I only really go shopping when I need something.
Well, we need to go and try on the latest designer dresses. Don't you want to try one on? They'll look so much better than that hideous sweatshirt and jeans that you always wear.
It was plainly obvious that Amanda and her daughters were girly girls, and I was a bit more of a tomboy. We just didn't have any overlapping interest, and that was entirely fine by me. But my dad really wanted us to bond and was constantly trying to force me to spend time with them. Eventually, he did give up, though, but only after he and Amanda got married. The wedding was a nightmare, as Amanda and her daughters forced me to wear a massive poofy pink dress. I felt like such a fool wearing that hideous thing, but they insisted that it was the latest fashion trend and that it was important for us to wear them. It was amazing that I didn't throw up the second the dress was put on my body, to be honest. At any rate, after they were married, things began to be a bit weird. I still continued to go back and forth between my parents, and the first time that something felt off was this one time that I came back from being at my mom's for a week. As I was walking towards my room, Amanda stopped me.
Oh, you're back? Well, listen, since you don't live here full-time like we do, we felt that it was only fair that my eldest daughter get your room since it's the biggest room in the house.
You did what? Dad, did you know about this?
Yeah, sorry, kiddo. It's only fair, though.
I was so furious. It didn't really matter that my new room was slightly smaller, but the fact that they hadn't even asked and just chose to move my things without my knowledge. Plus, they didn't exactly treat my belongings with any kind of respect. They had essentially put all my books, comic books, and video games in one huge pile in the closet. It took me days to sort through them all and put them back the way I had them. That, however, was only the first incident. A couple months went by, and one day I went out to hang out with my friends, and when I came back, I discovered that my computer was missing. I thought we had been robbed, but then, when I went to my father, my fear turned to anger as my dad told me what happened. Dad, my computer was stolen.
No, it wasn't. We just gave it to Amanda's daughters. They need it for school.
What? That's a top-of-the-line gaming computer. They don't need something with that much power just to do math problems.
Well, I paid for it, so I get to say who gets to use it. And we gave it to Amanda's daughters. Besides, those video games are a complete waste of time.
After that, I stopped keeping anything of value at my dad's house, and for the next few years, it was one thing after another. When I finally turned 18 and could choose where I wanted to live, I made the choice to move everything to my mom's. It was just the right decision, really, since my mom lived close to the college that I wanted to attend, and by living there, I could save myself some travel time and money. At least that was what I told my father, and it was true. But the bigger and more important reason was because I had had enough of Amanda and her hellspawn, and I wanted to finally move away from them and their greedy paws. Even after I graduated from college, I still lived at my mom's, at least until I found my first job as game designer for a major video game company. I had taken programming in college, and I was pretty good at it. So much so that they offered me a fairly well-paying position. And so for a few years, things were going well for me. I loved my job, and I still kept in touch with my dad, but I only really visited occasionally, and only really when my stepsisters and stepmother weren't around. However, my father gave me a call out of the blue one day.
Hey Beth, listen, can you come over for dinner this weekend? We're hosting a special dinner for your stepsister, and we really want you to be there.
Do I really have to go, Dad? They don't care about me at all.
Yes, it's very important that you come. It's mandatory.
Part of me wanted to fight back against the fact that he didn't even want to give me a choice in the matter, but I wasn't interested in fighting him at the moment. And so I went over when he asked and found out that it was all a part of some scheme that he and Amanda had cooked up. They had apparently invited over a friend of theirs that had a rather wealthy son that they were trying to set up with Amanda's eldest daughter. Unlike me, both of her daughters hadn't done much with their lives. Neither had taken any schooling after high school, and they didn't even have part-time jobs. My father even still gave them an allowance which only partially fed their shopping addictions. I could tell that my father was eager to marry off one of them so that he wouldn't have such a strain on his own bank account. The only snag was that their friend and his son wanted to meet the entire family, and that included me. The idea was that he wanted to ensure that we were a healthy and well-rounded family, and that we would be a good influence on his son. Personally, I couldn't care less, but since my dad wanted me there, I had no choice. Just before dinner, my father's friend showed up along with his son. Until that moment, I had never felt butterflies in my stomach when seeing someone. But once Ryan came into the room, I felt an instant attraction to him. However, I knew that I needed to ignore him since he wasn't there to meet me but my stepsister. The funny thing, though, was that while she introduced herself to him, he kept glancing over at me. If didn't know better, I could have sworn that he felt the same way I did. As dinner went on, we kept catching each other staring at the other, and I discovered that he had a lot in common with me. He worked in finance, but his passion was playing video games, and he had a home theater system installed in his home because he loved movies so much. I had to bite my tongue more than once to resist hitting on him. Meanwhile, my stepsister was completely failing to impress him. Every time he asked her a question, she would make rude remarks.
So what kinds of things do you do for fun?
Oh, I love shopping and reading fashion magazines. What about you?
Oh, I love movies and games. I think I've seen every film ever made at least once.
Why, that sounds like such a waste of time, especially since most movies are so boring. You sound just like Beth.
I'm not surprised by that.
As soon as he said it, I began to blush. I knew that he wasn't there for me, but it just felt like he was the perfect guy for me. As the night came to a close, he secretly passed me a slip of paper when no one was looking. On it was his phone number. After that day, we began talking and began dating. I knew that once my father found out that he would be angry, but I didn't care. Although my reasons for pursuing a relationship with him weren't motivated by revenge, I would be lying if I said that stealing him away from my stepsister didn't feel good to me. As the weeks went on, I knew that I needed to tell my father about him and that I was dating him. I had to come clean since it was only a matter of time before they found out. Hey, Dad. So I wanted to talk to you about Ryan.
Ryan? Oh, you mean my friend's kid. Yeah, that guy is an idiot. I asked my friend about him and he said that he is dating some ugly, nerdy girl. Ah, well, I was so close to finally marrying off one of Amanda's kids. You can't believe how much of a burden they are on me. It's a shame, but he's a loser.
No, he really isn't. And just for your information, I'm the nerdy girl that he is dating. But good to know that you weren't all that emotionally invested in him dating your stepdaughter. With that, I hung up on him. It was bad enough that he badmouthed the man that I was growing to love, but for him to badmouth me, even though he didn't realize that he was doing so, was unforgivable. It took me months before I finally spoke with him again, and it was only to rub his nose in the fact that I was engaged to Ryan. Years passed, and Ryan and I got married, and we now have 2 lovely children. Meanwhile, my 2 stepsisters are still single, miserable, and living off of my father's money. They've grown quite fat over the years, since they essentially do nothing other than shop and watch TV all day long as well. In fact, things got so bad that my father was finally forced to kick Amanda and her daughters out of his house and divorce her. They were driving him in financial ruin, and he finally got a backbone and realized that he had made a terrible mistake. Shortly after that, he called me up and was crying on the phone, begging me to forgive him for all of the times that he had sided with them over me and for ruining our relationship. I didn't want to forgive him, but Ryan encouraged me to at least give him a second chance. Since then, my father has actually made an attempt to better himself, and he has been a very good grandfather as well. To be honest, I'm very grateful that I attended that dinner all those years ago. The thought of Ryan ending up with one of my stepsisters is a terrifying one. He truly would not have been happy with her, and she would have bled him dry of all his wealth. My father to this day says that he is happy that I ended up with such a wonderful husband, but I know that he is secretly salty that I stole him away from my stepsisters. But hey, he chose me. I can't help it. I'm his princess, and he is my Prince Charming. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
My name is Kevin, and the past 2 years have been incredibly rough for me. It all started off with my wife of 7 years, Danielle, demanding that we get divorced. She refused to tell me the reason why, although I had always suspected that it was because she was cheating on me. Unfortunately, I could never prove it. What made matters worse was that I was only able to hire a very inexpensive attorney, and they were steamrolled by the shark that my ex-wife hired. At the time, I had no idea how she could afford to hire him, as we shared our assets, and she hadn't worked since our children were born. Her sleazy lawyer managed to get her full custody of our 2 sons, Quinn and Felix. That was terrifying, as I wasn't even sure if she would ever let me see my children again. Not to mention, her lawyer managed to get the judge to force me to pay a large amount of child support and alimony, since I assumed that it would be going to my children. I wasn't too upset, since everything I ever did was for their benefit. She would often call me a deadbeat dad, but nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, I ended up having to get a second job just to cover my child support and alimony. When we first got divorced, I weighed over 250 pounds, but I lost an unhealthy amount of weight as time went on. I just couldn't help it, as I could barely afford anything for myself, which meant I ate the worst foods and always felt tired. Honestly, how many deadbeat fathers do you know that work 2 jobs and make sure that their children are always taken care of? At any rate, she would constantly call me on the phone and harass me.
Kevin, you are such a pathetic loser. I can't believe that the judge didn't award me more money than he did. I guess it's based off your salary, though. And you work such a miserable job. No wonder our boys are always wearing rags.
I work 2 jobs and send you most of my money, Danielle. I can barely afford rent and food. How on earth aren't our boys wearing better clothes? What are you spending all that money on?
As if. The amount you send barely covers their food. You're such a pathetic excuse for a man. I'm so glad that I divorced you.
She was so incredibly cruel, and every time she would call me like this, it would make me feel terrible for days. I tried to contact the police, but they told me that they couldn't do anything as she wasn't threatening me, and that if I wanted the calls to stop, then I should just block her number. But if I did that, then I would lose the one form of contact with my boys that I still had. As terrible as she was, she did let me talk to them on the phone from time to time, and so I just had to endure her abuse. It bothered me so much that she constantly would claim that the $3,500 a month that I would send her wasn't enough. With that kind of money, our boys should be eating well and dress in brand new clothes all the time. But the few times that she would let me see them, they always looked so incredibly thin and were wearing clothes that had holes in them. I wanted to ask them what life living with their mother was like, but she would never leave me alone with them and was always hovering close by. It was absolute torture, but at least I could see them, and that was enough for me. To make matters worse, as soon as the divorce papers were signed, she had her boyfriend, Rob, move in with her and my boys. Of course, I didn't like Rob as he essentially stole my wife, but it was more than that. There was something about him that concerned me, and I hated the idea of my children living with him. However, there was nothing I could do. Or rather, I thought that was the case until I spoke with my brother. Listen, Kevin, you have to do something. You're wasting away to nothing. I know you love your children, but you can't keep sending your ex-wife that much money. It's going to kill you. I have no choice.
It's what the courts decided. If I don't pay, then I could get into serious trouble. Listen, I just got some money from work as a bonus. I'm going to loan it to you so you can hire a private investigator. You're giving her a lot of money and it's clearly not going to the kids. Maybe you'll find out what she's doing with it. My brother lent me $15,000, which I was incredibly grateful for, and while I really wanted to spend some of it on improving my life, I knew that he was right. Something wasn't adding up, and so I went and found a private investigator that would take my case. He wasn't cheap, but he promised that he would get results and keep me up to date on what he was finding. It did cost me $5,000, and I hoped that it would end up being worth it. At the end of the first week, he came and told me that he suspected that there was something very shady about Danielle and Rob, although he needed more time to figure out what it was. Hearing this made me a bit concerned, as I already knew that the two of them were dishonest people. This wasn't new information, and so I tried to be patient and wait. As the second week rolled around, that's when I knew that I had spent the money that my brother lent me wisely. The private eye discovered several things that enraged me. For starters, he discovered that Rob was beating my children by slapping them. The investigator had several videos of Rob doing this when he thought no one was looking. On top of that, he had photos of Rob and Danielle wearing designer clothes and eating out at fancy restaurants, while my boys ate frozen dinners and were forced to mend their own clothes. I wanted to take this to the police right away, but the private investigator and my brother urged me to wait just one more week, as he suspected that there was more to be found. I tried my best to wait, and it was eating me up alive to know what my boys were going through. I just felt helpless and angry both at Danielle and Rob, but also at myself for not being able to do more. However, after the third week, the investigator dropped some serious bombshells on me. Oh boy, I do have some juicy information for you. What did you find? I found out that a month after you got divorced, that Danielle and Rob secretly got married. It took some effort to find it, but I managed to find a copy of their marriage certificate. Good for them, but how does that help me? Kevin, that means that you've been paying child support and alimony when you shouldn't have been. In our country, if your ex-wife gets married, then that means that they can't get alimony or child support anymore. The new husband takes on those responsibilities. That's right, but there's more. I found out that before the two of you separated that your ex-wife won the lottery. She won over $2 million, and she hid that money in a secret account. So that's how she afforded a high-priced lawyer. Okay, but how does that affect my case? It's the best news ever. This means that half of that money should have been yours since you were legally married. This is incredible news. Both of them were ecstatic and I wanted to be as well, but I had been suffering for so long that I didn't want to give my hopes up just yet. The next day, my brother and I went to a lawyer and used more of the money that I had been lent to hire them to reopen my case with my ex-wife. We gave them all the information that the investigator had been able to gather, and within a couple weeks, the lawyer brought the case before a judge. With the evidence that we had gathered, the judge agreed to re-examine my case, and after looking at everything, he completely reversed his previous ruling. The investigator had been right, but what happened next nearly gave me a heart attack. After seeing all the evidence, the judge forced my ex-wife to give me half of the money that she had won in the lottery, which was over $1 million. Unfortunately for her, that was all the money that she had left as she was burning through it incredibly fast, but I had zero sympathy for her. Not only that, but the judge ruled that since my ex-wife also hid that she had remarried and was therefore not entitled to child support or alimony, that she would be forced to pay me back the money I had given her over the years, which amounted to more than $80,000. But since she didn't have that money, that she would be forced to sell their home so that she could pay me back. Also, that I would no longer have to give her any more money. I couldn't believe it. I was no longer going to have to give that selfish witch my money, but unfortunately, she still had custody of my boys, and there was no way that I was going to let that continue. The way that she and Rob were treating them was disgusting, and I wouldn't let it continue. So I took the videos that the investigator had taken and had my lawyer file abuse charges against Rob and Danielle. Once again, the judge saw the evidence that I had and sided with my lawyer and I. With this evidence, the police spoke to my sons, and they told them all about the abuse that they had suffered from Rob and Danielle, and it was more than enough to send both to jail for the next 10 years. On top of that, the judge awarded me full custody of my boys. In the span of 2 months, I went from poor, barely able to eat, and worried sick about my sons, to wealthy and finally able to be a loving parent to them. They were so happy to be away from my ex-wife and Rob, and with the money that I had been awarded, I was able to give them all the things that they needed and wanted. Since then, my sons have never been happier and are doing well in school and love living with me. As for me, I gained back some weight, but I managed to keep myself at a much healthier weight, and I have more energy and have never been happier. I did quit one of my jobs, as I no longer needed to work quite so many hours to make ends meet. I even started going to the gym and even dating as well, and now have a fiancé that my boys love and adore. Since my brother had been such an amazing source of help and support, I returned the loan that he had given me along with another $30,000. He tried to not accept the money, of course, but I felt that it was only right that he should share in some of my success. After all, he had proven himself to an amazing uncle and brother, and I wanted to show him how much I appreciated all that he did for us. As for Danielle and Rob, both of them are rotting in jail. I have heard that Rob has it pretty rough since the other inmates found out that he hurt children. Even though there are worse criminals in jail with him, the inmates view hurting kids as the worst crime you can commit, and so they take it out on Rob. Personally, I wonder if he'll make it through the 10 years in one piece. And Danielle doesn't have it much better. The few times I've forced my boys to visit her in prison. She looks terrible. She's clearly depressed and has gained a significant amount of weight. She now looks like a pregnant pig. She barely says a word when they see her. After all that she had put me through over the last 2 years, and knowing what her and Rob had been doing to our sons. My only regret is that she will only be in jail for 10 years, as I feel that she deserves to be in there for so much longer because of all the pain she put my sons and I through. Thanks for watching.
Michaela's boyfriend suddenly walked into the house while I was reading in the living room, holding 2 bags and a box. I wondered what he was doing at our house with that much luggage. Just before I could ask, Michaela and my parents walked into the living room. Right there, they crushed me completely with the words they said to me.
You have to leave the house. Michaela's boyfriend needs somewhere to stay before they get married and move to the States.
I was shocked to my bones. They were kicking me out from Michaela's boyfriend. I burst into tears. I pleaded with them that I had nowhere to go, but they didn't care. Michaela walked away and returned with my things. That night, I was kicked out of the house. It was a tough period for me. My twin sister and I have always been treated differently from a very young age. Now, I wasn't ugly, but I agree that I'm not as pretty as my twin. You see, even though we are twins, we aren't identical twins. She had long, healthy hair, longer lashes, pretty face, and the perfect body. During our childhood years, it was obvious who my parents' favorite was. There was a time when they were invited to a party, and my sister and I were around 10 years of age at the time. The invitation, though, stated that they had to come alone or bring only one more person. We were all in the living room when my parents were discussing what to do. They wanted to go with us, but doing the invitation stated that all 4 of us couldn't go.
Well, we can only bring one of them, so should we take Michaela? She's more presentable as our child.
Right? I was thinking the same. Michaela, would you like to go with us?
As expected, she agreed to go with them. I sat a little distance away from them, watching as they discussed happily, forgetting about me. 2 days later, they left for the party, leaving me all alone in our big house without food. I was forced to eat just bread, as I couldn't find anything else. They returned home very late at night, my dad carrying a sleeping Michaela in his arms. I ran to give them a hug, happy they were finally home. However, my parents brushed me aside after a brief hug and went upstairs. Feeling sad, I went up to my room to sleep. When we became teenagers, my introverted side began to show. I still think that I only became introverted, though, because of how I was always treated and left out of things by my family. I had no friends, so I was always home after school. However, Michaela had a lot of friends. My parents always ensured to buy her everything she requested. Whenever we went out shopping, Michaela was allowed to get whatever she wanted while I was only ever given scraps that my parents selected. Due to how good Michaela always looked and how lavishly she spent, People got attracted to her and wanted to befriend her. On our 15th birthday, my parents wished a happy birthday to my sister first. From my room where I sat crying, I could hear their happy voices in the living room. I remained in my room until noon, not eating or speaking. Later, I began to hear noises in the house. I couldn't help but wonder what was going on. My door opened, and my dad poked his head in. A grin appeared on my face, as I thought he was there to wish me a happy birthday.
Leave the house for a few hours. We're throwing a party for Michaela and her friends, and she doesn't want you around the house. I left the back door open for you.
However, my joy got caught short when he said. I was dumbfounded. He left immediately after he told me that, and I could feel my heart folding. How could he do that to me? While I was thinking about it, the door opened again to reveal my mom.
Did your father not tell you to leave? Get the hell up from that bed.
Hearing her scream, I sprang up and dashed out of the bed, my hair a mess. I went out through the back of the house into the street. Since I hadn't eaten all day, I got so weak after walking aimlessly for a long time. When I could barely walk anymore, I was forced to sit on the cold ground. I remained there, hungry and tired until late into the night. I thought Michaela must have finished her party, so I managed to return home. Just then, my parents also drove into the compound.
What are you doing here? Your sister's friends are still here. You can't go in.
I was confused. Why can't I go in just because my sister and her friends were in? That night, I didn't keep quiet. I fired back at them, telling them I was going to go in because I had as much rights as Michaela. However, that angered my parents. They told me I should be lucky I was born together with my sister. According to them, an ugly girl like me didn't have a place in their lives, and I should know my place. Because of our argument, I was forced to sleep outside the house, in the freezing cold, on an empty stomach. This went on until we finally finished high school. When it was time for college, Michaela was allowed to go to an expensive college which she'd always dreamed about attending. I wanted to go with her, but Michaela refused. She didn't want anyone to associate her with me. My parents also said I didn't deserve to attend a school as expensive as that, so I was left to go to a less popular and cheap school. Things got worse for me when my parents refused to get me important things I needed at college. I was forced to borrow from others while my sister got everything. In my second year, I got a part-time job. I couldn't afford to beg from others anymore. I hid it from my parents, and with the money I got from it, I settled some bills my parents refused to take care of. 3 years later, we finally finished. I studied medicine while my sister studied business. Once we were done, my parents helped my sister start up her clothing line and also her cosmetics business. It was hard for me to undertake my residency program after college, as most hospitals were discriminating in terms of the college we attended. Mine was too local, so they didn't want to take me in. I tried for a year, and during that period, my sister's business flourished. I was forced to go to her for help. Since she'd become influential, I thought she could put in words for me with her friends and help me start the program in a good hospital. But my sister refused, saying,
"You won't ever become a doctor. Stop trying now that you still can. I won't waste my time helping a miserable fellow. Leave my sight."
I was shocked by her response. How could she say that to her sister? I tried to beg her more, but she had her guards throw me out of her company, causing me to have a bruise on my knee. I went home in tears and told my parents about her behavior. Now, I wonder why I did that. As usual, they supported her and asked me to take my miserable self away from their faces. I got a full-time job and forgot about my residency program for a while. A year later, we both got into relationships, mine being my first. One day, my parents asked me to bring him over. I was happy, thinking they were finally interested in me. On the evening of the next day, I brought my boyfriend home. I was surprised to see my sister do the same. While eating dinner, my parents and sister out on their usual behavior, comparing both men and saying how much of a loser my boyfriend was to be in a relationship with an ugly lady.
He's ugly and poor too. As they say, birds of the same feathers flock together.
They all burst into laughter. When it got too much to handle, my boyfriend was forced to stand up and leave, their loud laughter following him. I stood up, tears in my eyes, and rushed after him. I tried to apologize on their behalf, but he wasn't having it. Right there, he broke up with me. I tried to hold him, but he pushed me off and stormed off. I felt a rush of shame, anger, and disappointment within me. I confronted my parents and Michaela after her boyfriend left. but only received more mockery in return. With my boyfriend gone, I focused more on just working. 2 months later, Michaela's boyfriend suddenly walked into the house while I was reading in the living room, holding 2 bags and a box. I wondered what he was doing at our house with that much luggage. Just before I could ask, Michaela and my parents walked into the living room. Right there, they crushed me completely with the words they said to me.
You have to leave the house. Michaela's boyfriend needs somewhere to stay before they get married and move to the States.
I was shocked to my bones. They were kicking me out for Michaela's boyfriend. I burst into tears. I pleaded with them that I had nowhere to go, but they didn't care. Michaela walked away and returned with my things. That night, I was kicked out of the house. It was a tough period for me. I spent 2 weeks going from one cheap hotel to the other before I was finally able to get a small apartment. That act of theirs prompted me to want to do better for myself. I worked harder and connected myself with influential people. With their help, I was able to start my residency program. It lasted for 2 years. Due to how fast I learned and how great I proved myself to be, I was retained as a doctor in the hospital, earning unbelievably high. Not for once did I think about my family throughout those years. I was more concerned about my growth. 3 years later, while in my mansion with a few friends, I was told that a woman who looked like me was begging to see me. I knew immediately that it was Michaela, but I wondered how she found me and what she wanted from me. I asked them to let her in. When I saw Michaela, my jaw dropped open. She was dressed in tattered clothes, her hair looking like it hadn't been combed for years. She was in tears. My friends and I sat and listened to her. According to her, she got deceived by her boyfriend, the one they sent me out for. He made her invest in a scam project and took off with all her money. Not only that, he also got my parents to invest in it, thinking they'd gain triple the amount afterward. My sister had to take loans too. When my father heard about him absconding with their money, he was hit with a heart attack and died. My mother fainted, and as she fell, she hit her head hard on the tiled floor, resulting in a brain injury that rendered her paralyzed with all her memory lost. Michaela had to sell all her businesses to pay for her loans. However, even after that, she still had quite a lot of debt to pay. She came to plead for forgiveness and my help, as they desperately needed it. I was elated hearing that, and I didn't fail to express it to her. I made her recall all the hardships they made me go through from a tender age, and how I had to work extremely hard to get myself to where I am. She held my legs, crying and begging, but I wasn't having it. I had my security guards throw her out of my house, just like she did when I went to get help from her many years ago. 2 days later, Michaela came to my office, still begging. I threatened to have her arrested if she came again before having her thrown out. A week later, as I arrived home in my car, I met her in front of my gate. I could tell that she was desperate when she pulled a knife on me and demanded that I give her some money or else she would stab me. She said that it was the least that I could do, since I owed her since we were family. Unfortunately for her, though, she was far too weak, and I was able to overpower her and disarm her before she could even try to hurt me. Once I got the knife away from her, I beat her up. I know that I probably shouldn't have, but after all the times that she and my parents had mistreated me and abused me over the years, this was finally my chance to get even with her. Once she was unconscious, I called the police and had her arrested for trespassing and threatening me with a weapon. The police dragged her away, and she ended up spending the next 5 years in prison. While there, my mother was sent to live in a nursing home since there was no one around to take care of her. From what I hear, the home that she was sent to is notorious for being among the worst places to live, and I have no doubt that she is quite miserable there. As for my sister, I have no doubt that she will have an even harder time getting money once she is released from prison. She was already in debt, but with a criminal history, she will have an even harder time. Personally, after all that they put me through, I think they have gotten off lightly. Thanks for watching.
Charlotte had agreed to bring him in the afternoon on Friday, but instead of her, it was the police who showed up at my house. What seems to be the problem, officers? You. We've received multiple reports that you've been more than a year without paying child support. What? That can't be. I've been keeping up with those payments. I can even show you the receipts. We've already taken a look at your ex-wife's accounts, and we've noticed there have been no incoming payments from you. If you want to show us your receipts, go ahead, but I doubt they'll show anything relevant. To my frustration, the police were right. My payment receipts were useless. Apparently, my ex had deceived me, asking me to deposit the child support money into an unrelated account that wasn't hers and couldn't be traced. All this to get me into trouble with the law and extract even more money from me. Hi, my name is Eric. I had been dating Charlotte, my girlfriend at the time, for a while when she confessed she was pregnant with my child. It was a surprise because we were both careful to prevent this sort of thing from happening. But after the initial shock, I accepted it without much trouble. Contraceptives fail, and if Charlotte wanted to have a child, I was okay with it. We weren't married or even living together, but we both had stable jobs and knew we could provide for the baby when it arrived.
You'll see how you'll get used to the idea. And when the baby is here, you'll even wonder why we didn't try to have one sooner.
I doubt that'll happen in the first year, with all the things we'll have to adjust and our period of getting used to the new circumstances. But once I get used to it, sure, why not?
We'll be a perfect family, you'll see. Have some faith.
Maybe not much else, but faith I had in abundance. During those months of pregnancy, and even a little afterward, once Henry was born and some more time had passed, Charlotte and I were at our best. We were both on top of things, taking care of each other and preparing for the arrival and subsequent upbringing of our child together. We took some well-deserved vacations when we could, renovated the house so that tasks would be out of the way once we were busy again, and complimented each other doing household chores as if we'd been cooperating for decades. It was wonderful, and if I ever doubted that we were rushing things by moving in together, having a child, and becoming a happy family after Charlotte and I had only known each other for 2 months, my doubts soon evaporated. Perhaps, in hindsight, I should have been suspicious that something was amiss. Not because of what Charlotte was doing, but because of the attitude Alice, Charlotte's sister, seemed to have taken towards me on each of her visits.
I bet Eric doesn't help you with anything around the house. At most, he puts some of his salary towards buying diapers for Henry.
Oh, but he does help me. In fact, he's very helpful. For a moment, we thought we'd need to hire domestic help, but in the end, it wasn't necessary.
Now that's a surprise. Don't take offense, Eric, but I've heard from many friends stories of women getting pregnant and their partners leaving them without a second thought.
I understand the concern, but I'm not like that.
No, we know you're not. Don't mind my sister. Ah, do you hear that? Henry's crying. He must have woken up from his nap. Why don't you go see what he needs?
As the months passed and Henry grew, I realized Charlotte was attending to him less and less. It's not that she was neglecting him per se, but if I was home at the same time as her, 90% of the time when the baby cried, it was me who took on the responsibility of attending to him. And no, I didn't mind at first, because I already considered Henry my son and saw it as a blessing to spend so much time with him. But I couldn't ignore the patterns of behavior of my girlfriend. Not only did she pawn off the child whenever she could, but she also seized any excuse to be away from him. She was increasingly leaving the house, either with her sister or her own friends, leaving me or a nanny to care for the baby. I think we should resolve this. You know, I don't mind doing my part in parenting. In fact, I'm happy to participate. But I get the impression that you're not interested in doing yours.
How dare you? Are you saying I don't care about my son? You should be ashamed to even insinuate that.
I'm not saying that. It's just that maybe we should distribute the workload more evenly. I'm not telling you that you can't go out and have fun whenever you want.
You'd better not. I hope you're not proving Alice right, that you're not worth it, neither as a partner nor for raising a child together. And speaking of Henry, I think it's time for his meal.
Charlotte only tended to him after we argued, briefly, to prove her point that she wasn't a negligent mother. But afterward, once the attention wasn't on her anymore, she reverted to being the same neglectful person as always. Not only did she go out whenever she pleased, barely stopping to make sure there was someone to take care of Henry in her absence, but she had also started asking me for more and more money for her expenses. At first, I thought it was for the child, as she claimed, but once I checked the accounts, I was confronted with the reality. No, only a small portion of all that money I gave her actually went towards Henry. The rest she spent on herself. I endured in that relationship for a couple more years for the sake of our child, but in the end, I couldn't take it anymore, and we separated. By law, she got custody, and I had to pay child support to ensure Henry lacked nothing. Henry could come to visit me every weekend at my new apartment, and in fact, that day when chaos arrived at my doorstep, it was precisely the child I was expecting. Charlotte had agreed to bring him in the afternoon on Friday, but instead of her, it was the police who showed up at my house. What seems to be the problem, officers? You. We've received multiple reports that you've been more than a year without paying child support. What? That can't be. I've been keeping up with those payments. I can even show you the receipts. We've already taken a look at your ex-wife's accounts, and we've noticed there have been no incoming payments from you. If you want to show us your receipts, go ahead, but I doubt they'll show anything relevant. To my frustration, the police were right. My payment receipts were useless. Apparently, my ex had deceived me, asking me to deposit the child support money into an unrelated account that wasn't hers and couldn't be traced. All this to get me into trouble with the law and extract even more money from me. I knew that my money did reach Charlotte for child support, as Henry lived well, lacking nothing. And Charlotte could even afford to not work or work fewer hours than she used to. It's just that my money was being obtained by another means of which I had no idea. The authorities, seeing that my story didn't match the documents, took me to court, and I ended up in jail for that alleged non-payment that never happened. It was a terrible few months for me, though fortunately, I was able to hire a good defense lawyer. Have you ever considered getting a DNA test? No. Why would I do that? I've never doubted that the child is mine. Maybe you should. I've been reviewing the case and I don't like it at all. I don't think it's far-fetched that your ex has been deceiving you to get your money. What do you recommend I do besides the test? Perhaps we should thoroughly investigate her, find out what she's up to, not just now, but before. It's likely we'll uncover some dirty tricks, especially since she already deceived you with the accounts. My legal team was right, of course. I got out of prison quickly, without even needing to go to trial, because after investigating a bit more deeply, they realized that the account I was sending the child support money to belonged to Alice, who very cleverly kept quiet about receiving these sums and had been secretly passing that money on to Charlotte. To make matters worse, the DNA test revealed that Henry wasn't mine, but someone else's, whom I later found out still had dealings with Charlotte. It seems it was all a strategy from the beginning to get me behind bars, for hurting her pride by leaving her and demanding that she respect my rights, and meanwhile, extracting more money from me. Fortunately, now justice was on my side, and after reporting her and exposing all the deception she orchestrated against me, it was Charlotte who was arrested. Alice wanted to fight for custody of the child, but she too was convicted for her participation in the scheme and forced to pay the corresponding fine. I would like to obtain custody of Henry, now that his mother and aunt will spend some time behind bars. Are you sure? You don't have any responsibility towards him anymore. In fact, the judge has already ruled that Charlotte must return all the child support money you gave her, plus a considerable compensation for everything she put you through. I still want custody, even though we're not related by blood. I was the one who cared for Henry the most in his early years. I consider him family, and I wouldn't want to lose contact. Not to mention, I was worried about what would become of him if I didn't obtain his legal custody. I didn't trust Charlotte's family, nor Henry's biological father, who, as far as I knew, had also been taking advantage of me in his own way, spending my money and seeing my ex behind my back. And I feared that Charlotte would soon be released from prison and return to her old tricks. The latter wouldn't happen, as my ex got a hefty sentence. Although it was the first time she had orchestrated a deception of these proportions, she was no stranger to trying to scam people for personal gain. I had no trouble obtaining full custody of Henry, which was a relief. I believe it was beneficial for both Henry and me. It turned out that Charlotte had continued to neglect Henry, often going on vacations with Henry's biological dad using the money I sent. Sometimes, she would leave Henry all alone at home. Despite this, Henry consistently showed a preference for me. Hence, when he separated from his mother, he didn't really miss her. On the contrary, the child adapted quickly to living with me, in a home that turned out to be much healthier than what he was used to. I filed a case against Henry's biological father for conniving with my ex and defrauding me, and he too was arrested. Not only did I ensure justice was served for the son I ended up adopting, but my ex also lost her freedom and her chance to claim Henry ever again, as I made her sign a document where she forever renounced custody in exchange for forgiving her a small part of her debt to me. Meanwhile, Henry and I were able to start a new life together as the family we were always meant to be. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more stories.